Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. A low growl rumbled in Zalvakar's throat as he turned his gaze toward the Eldorei figure bound before him. The once composed, dignified Varesh Julik had been reduced to a bloodied captive, restrained within an energy field that flickered with a cruel rhythmic pulse. His silver-white skin, characteristic of his people, was marred with fresh bruises, his ornate robes torn and dirtied from days of captivity. The mercenary warlord stood at the center of a dimly lit control chamber, his crimson-hued exoskeletal armor contrasting sharply against the cold metallic walls. His eyes, slitted, predatory, remained fixed on the holographic projection before him. The Archivel had arrived. The sleek diplomatic vessel emerged from hyperspace in a controlled deceleration, its hull gliding toward Velkara with deliberate precision. Flanking the vessel were 6 escort ships, their streamlined exteriors betraying the fact that they were only lightly armed, standard protocol for diplomatic envoys. The deep void of space stretched behind them, but ahead, the swirling cerulean clouds of Velkara's upper atmosphere framed a stark reality. The colony was already lost. In the fortress at the heart of Velkara, Zalvakar's reptilian features curled into a smug grin as he watched the Eldorei delegation approach. Like all Zorak, he was built for war, tall, clad in hardened exoskeletal plating, a species bred for brutality. They weren't just mercenaries. They were executioners of the highest bidder. The Archivel's arrival was expected, anticipated, and ultimately inconsequential. Zalvakar extended a taloned hand, activating the transmission. The blue-hued hollow interface flickered before him, and within moments, the image of Selkar Vir, the Eldorei diplomat, materialized on the other end of the channel. His deep violet robes remained pristine despite the grave circumstances, but his composed demeanor did little to mask the tension in his gaze. "Ah," Zalvakar's voice slithered through the chamber, laced with amusement. "You actually came." He let out a short, guttural laugh. "Did you truly believe we would entertain negotiations? That your carefully crafted words would change our minds?" The mercenary leader stepped forward, his heavy boots clicking against the floor. He reached down and ran one of his hooked claws along the exposed throat of Varesh Julik, a cruel gesture meant to elicit a reaction. The Eldorei captive flinched, but remained silent. "The Galactic Council is a carcass, rotting from the inside," Zalvakar continued, his voice thick with disdain. "Your people have clung to its empty promises for too long. But today, Velkara is ours, and you have nothing left to bargain with." Selkar Vir's expression did not falter, but his elongated fingers clenched at his side. "This is an act of war," he said, his voice carefully measured. "You have no claim to this world. Release the Counselor now, and perhaps the Council will show leniency." "Leniency?" Zalvakar let out a low chuckle, his fanged maw splitting into a vicious grin. "You misunderstand, diplomat. We do not seek concessions. We do not seek wealth. We do not even seek power in your council's empty halls. We only want to watch it burn." The mercenary turned back to his captive, his claws tightening around the Eldorei's chin, forcing him to look up at the display. "Tell them, Julik," he sneered. "Tell them what happens next." Julik, though weakened, lifted his gaze toward the projection. His eyes met Selkar Vir's, and in them, the diplomat saw only quiet acceptance. "They will kill me," Julik said, his voice hoarse but steady. "And then they will come for you." The declaration was punctuated by a sudden, violent tremor as the colony's surface-to-orbit cannons roared to life. The sky above Velkara lit up with streaks of energy as the orbital defenses turned on the incoming diplomatic fleet. The first volley found its mark instantly. One of the escort ships, barely prepared for an assault, was engulfed in a chain of explosions before it could even attempt evasive action. A second ship was struck moments later, its hull breached, its engines flickering out before it spiraled into the planet's gravity well. On board the Archivell, alarms blared as the vessel veered sharply to avoid the incoming fire. In the secure conference chamber, Selkar Vir felt the tremors ripple through the ship. His normally impassive face showed the faintest trace of alarm as he turned to the man seated across from him. Morgan Wagner remained completely still. The human chancellor's posture was relaxed, his hands folded before him as though he were simply observing a minor inconvenience rather than a full-scale attack. His ice-blue eyes were locked onto the live feed of Velkara's surface, where the Zorak mercenaries were already rallying their ground forces. Selkar took a step forward. "Chancellor, hold the line, my friend." Wagner's voice was calm, almost reassuring. "Let them believe they've won." His lips curled slightly, the closest thing to a smile he would allow himself in that moment. "Just give it a little more time." Selkar's brow furrowed. The Archivell had no combat capabilities beyond light deflectors and emergency countermeasures. The remaining escort ship was already struggling to provide cover as another wave of torpedo fire streaked toward them. "Time is something we are rapidly running out of," Selkar pressed. "Your fleet is still—" Wagner raised a hand, silencing him with a simple gesture. He reached for his data pad, tapping a secured line. The transmission connected almost instantly. A deep, composed voice answered. "This is Admiral Asghari." Wagner leaned back in his seat, his voice devoid of tension. "Admiral, how's the mission?" 9 hours earlier, the command center of the United Earth Defense was quiet, its walls lined with the hum of holo displays mapping galactic territories and fleet movements. Beneath the subdued lighting, officers worked with measured efficiency, exchanging updates and reviewing security reports. It was the kind of tense stillness that only existed before something went terribly wrong. Then, a junior officer strode across the polished floor, datapad in hand, his expression carefully composed yet tight with tension. He approached the central conference table, where Chancellor Morgan Wagner sat flanked by the highest-ranking military commanders of the UED. "Chancellor Wagner," the officer said, his voice steady but urgent. "We have an incoming transmission. Direct line from an Eldorei diplomat. He says it's critical." Wagner's gaze flicked toward the men seated around him. None of them spoke, but the subtle shifts in their postures indicated the same unspoken thought. The Eldorei did not call for help lightly. "Patch it through," Wagner ordered, leaning forward as the holographic interface blinked to life before him. The image of Selkar Vir materialized in the air above the conference table. The Eldorei diplomat's normally composed face was tight with strain, his bioluminescent silver eyes slightly dimmed, a telltale sign of stress in his species. "Chancellor Wagner." Selkar hesitated. "I know this is not your conflict, but—" Wagner cut him off, his voice firm. "Speak, Selkar." The Eldorei composed himself quickly. "Velkara has fallen." The words silenced the room. Selkar pressed forward. "The colony, it's lost. The Zorak mercenaries executed our security forces and seized the fortress. Councillor Varesh Julik is their prisoner. They're threatening to execute him publicly." Wagner's face remained unreadable. And the council's response? Selkar's jaw tightened. The council has chosen to analyze the situation. His voice held no small amount of bitterness. They fear that an intervention might escalate tensions with the Zorak factions. They claim they cannot afford a diplomatic incident, so they need to think. The weight of those words hung over the room. The council, cowards in their bureaucratic hesitation. Selkar leaned slightly forward, urgency cutting through his voice. "Chancellor, they will do nothing. But if the Zorak are allowed to execute Ulik, it will not stop there. They will move on to other territories. They will turn the Eldorei into an example." A long silence followed. Wagner's gaze swept across the table. He met the eyes of the men in the room. No one spoke, but the answer was already written on their faces. He turned back to Selkar, his voice steady and resolute. "From the beginning, you have always stood by us. We owe you this, my friend." His tone carried no doubt. "You can count on us." Selkar's shoulders sagged in relief. "Thank you, Chancellor. I will be waiting for your word." The transmission cut. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then Wagner stood, adjusting the cuffs of his uniform, and turned to the men seated at the table. His expression had not changed, but the weight of command settled across his shoulders like steel plating. "What's our move?" The answer came immediately. Admiral Kamal Asghari straightened in his chair, his sharp, dark eyes locked onto Wagner's. "I know Velkara." His voice carried the authority of a man who had seen more battles than most. "I know how we get in." Wagner gave him a single nod. "Go on." Asghari leaned forward, his fingers tapping the display panel in front of him. The holomap shifted, zooming in on Velkara's orbital defenses and surface infrastructure. "They won't see us coming," Asghari said, "but it won't be an invasion." "Not at first. We send in 2 teams, one to sabotage their defenses, another to extract Ulik before they realize what's happening. We disable their shields, we cut them off from reinforcements, and by the time they understand what's going on, they'll already be finished." Wagner's expression didn't shift. "And the diplomatic delegation?" "You will go to Velkara with Selkar," Asghari said plainly. "You'll help to keep them talking. Let them think they have the upper hand. We need them to believe this is still a political matter, until it's too late." He tapped the holomap again, highlighting 6 escort ships flanking the diplomatic vessel, the Arkavel. "They'll try to intimidate the delegation. That's why the escort ships will be empty." His voice was matter-of-fact. "No crew, just remote AI controls. They'll scan as manned, they'll move like manned ships. But the moment they're attacked, no lives will be lost." Wagner's gaze didn't waver. "You expect them to fire on the delegation first?" Asghari nodded. "They'll go for the escorts immediately, thinking it will rattle us, thinking it will make the Eldari afraid. It's a message." He paused, then added, "To sell the deception, we'll use heat signature projectors. The mercenaries won't just see ships. They'll detect what looks like a full crew complement. From the outside, those ships will feel real." Wagner folded his hands together. "And when they destroy them?" A cold silence hung in the room. "Then they'll believe they've won." Asghari's expression hardened. "And that's when the real fight begins." Wagner absorbed this, then gave a slight nod. Asghari turned to his officers. "I'll contact Lanier and Oliveira. They'll need to be ready immediately." Across the table, Admiral Austin Haddad crossed his arms. "I'll mobilize the fleets," he said, his voice deep and deliberate. "Coordinate the squadrons. We'll be ready to deploy in just a few hours." General Jonah Leon, standing at the far end of the table, nodded. "I'll handle logistics. I want full deployment capability, supplies, tactical response teams, stealth craft. Everything is on standby." The room, once silent, was now alive with motion. Orders were relayed, holo displays flickered with incoming fleet data, and commanders moved with precision honed by decades of war. Humanity would not leave its allies waiting. Not for the Council, not for indecision. They would act now. Back to the colony, the Arkavel drifted in silence, its battered hull illuminated only by the faint glow of Velkara's atmosphere. Scorch marks lined its exterior, where the mercenary attack had already claimed 2 of its escort ships. Inside, the crew held their breath, waiting. No transmissions, no countermeasures, just a quiet endurance that masked the storm already brewing beneath the surface. In the ship's secure conference chamber, Selkar Vir stood before the holographic display, his posture tense, yet outwardly controlled. The mercenary leader, Zalvakar, had made his demands clear, but Selkar had not answered yet. Instead, he kept the Zorak waiting, delaying, buying time. Morgan Wagner sat beside him, watching the real-time battlefield data with a careful, unshaken gaze. The mercenaries assumed this was a simple diplomatic engagement, that the Eldari were stalling because they were afraid. They weren't wrong about the stalling, but they had no idea who was truly playing for time. Far from the colony, in a safe distance, on the bridge of the HSS Crusade, Admiral Kamal Asghari stood with his arms crossed, his dark eyes scanning the data feeds. The moment had arrived. He pressed a secure channel. "Lanier, Oliveira, what's your position?" Seconds passed. Then 2 curt replies came through. "We're in." "Same here." Asghari's lip twitched in a small, approving motion. Then he opened another private channel, this one to the Archivel. "We're in." Back in the Fortress Command Center, Zalvakar's patience was running thin. The Eldorai ship had gone silent, refusing to respond to his threats. He clenched a fist, his claws digging into his own palm. "They are stalling," he growled. "Enough of this." He turned sharply to his officers. "Destroy 2 more of their ships. Show them we are done waiting. And if they do not respond after that, we begin executing prisoners. Start with the lesser officials. The Eldorai will break before they let one of their leaders die on a broadcast." A technician's mandibles clicked nervously. "Sir, if we push too hard, they might scatter and—" Zalvakar snarled, cutting him off. "Then let them scatter. Either they surrender or they run like cowards. Either way, we win." The order was given. Outside, the colony's orbital cannons locked onto 2 more escort ships. Missile salvos roared through the void. The first ship barely had time to react before a direct hit tore through its hull, igniting a cascade of explosions that shattered it apart. The second took evasive action, but its engines were clipped. Fire erupted from its propulsion system as it began a slow, spiraling descent toward the planet below. Inside the Archivel, the ship trembled from the impact nearby. The tension in the air thickened. Selkar turned to Wagner, his voice low but urgent. "They are pressing. We cannot delay much longer." Wagner continued to watch the data, his mind working through every scenario. Then he finally spoke. "We let them think they're winning." Selkar's brow furrowed. "And what happens when they think they've already won?" Wagner leaned back slightly, a ghost of a smile barely touching his expression. "Then we remind them what a real war looks like." Deep beneath Velkara's surface, the infiltration had already begun. Captain Randy Lanier moved like a shadow through the maintenance corridors, his team following closely. The shadow team had slipped into the colony unnoticed, bypassing security checkpoints through paths even the mercenaries had overlooked. It was methodical, quiet work, until now. They reached the access panel to the main shield generator. Lars Ekström, their demolitions expert, was already setting up a breach protocol. Lanier crouched beside him. "How long?" Ekström didn't look up as his hands worked over the device. 5 minutes to disable security. Another 5 to rig the shutdown. "We don't have 10, Lanier muttered, glancing at his watch. "Make it 5 total." Ekström nodded, adjusting his setup immediately. A faint vibration ran through the floor. Distant explosions. "Sounds like they're tightening the noose," whispered Kenji Oshiro, the team's hacker, his sharp eyes darting to the dimly lit corridor behind them. Lanier didn't flinch. He tapped his comms. "Status check. Thunder Team, report." The response came almost instantly. "Thunder Team is in position." Major Dave Oliveira crouched behind a stack of supply crates, his rifle steady against his shoulder as he scanned the dimly lit storage chamber. Thunder Team had infiltrated through an old cargo transit tunnel, moving silently through the lower levels of the fortress. Their objective was clear: locate Varesh Julik's holding area and gather intelligence before making any move. The execution order hadn't been given yet, but time was running out. Felix Weber, the team's engineer, was already at work on a terminal, attempting to access internal security logs. He navigated the interface smoothly, slipping past outdated encryption. "We're in their local grid," he muttered, trying to pinpoint Ulik's location. Nikolai Dragunov kept watch near the chamber's entrance, his eyes scanning the corridor beyond. "Make it fast," he murmured. "We're exposed out here." Samuel Okafor, the team's medic, adjusted the rifle strapped to his back, keeping his focus on the path ahead. We don't even know if he's still in the main holding block. The Zorak could have moved him. Weber spoke firmly. Security logs say he was in Containment Block 3 as of 2 hours ago. No recorded transfers since. Oliveira nodded. That's where we go. A faint metallic clink echoed from deeper in the corridor. Footsteps. Approaching. Contact, Dragunov whispered, raising his rifle. Oliveira gave the order. We're moving. Now. Thunder Team slipped back into the shadows, vanishing into the maze of tunnels before the patrol could spot them. In the command center, Zalvakar's claws tapped against the edge of his console. His impatience had turned into something worse, unease. Something was wrong. His communications officer turned suddenly. Sir, we're detecting minor system fluctuations, motion sensors flickering in and out in several sectors. Sabotage? Zalvakar asked. The technician hesitated. Unknown. But we also have security feeds that are cutting off for fractions of a second. Zalvakar's mandibles twitched. Coincidence? The technician swallowed hard. If it is, it's the worst timing I've ever seen. A deep, guttural snarl rumbled in the warlord's throat. He turned to his officers. Double all patrols. Seal the lower levels. If something is crawling around in my fortress, I want it found. And the prisoners? One of his men asked. Zalvakar narrowed his gaze. Take Julek to maximum security. I want him under constant watch. If the Eldarai continue to hesitate, we will make an example of him. Live. He turned back to the holo display, where the Archivell still hovered in silence, refusing to respond. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Something wasn't right, and he was going to find out what. The ventilation shaft was narrow, damp with the stale air of Velkara's underground infrastructure. Captain Randy Lanier advanced steadily, his breath even as he led Shadow Team through the abandoned corridors beneath the fortress. The glow of emergency lighting flickered against the metal walls, casting long, distorted shadows. Every step was deliberate, every movement silent. Behind him, Lars Ekström adjusted the charge pack on his belt. The Swedish demolitions expert was silent as always, his mind already running calculations for the sabotage ahead. Mateo Rojas, a ghost in the dark, moved like liquid, his compact form barely making a sound. Kenji Oshiro brought up the rear, his sharp eyes flicking between his holoscanner and the shifting shadows ahead. They were close. Lanier raised a fist, signaling a halt. The team flattened against the corridor walls as two Zorak mercenaries passed by an intersection ahead, their reptilian forms moving with slow, heavy steps. The mercs wore the standard combat harnesses of hired muscle, their weapons slung low, a sign of overconfidence. Rojas glanced at Lanier, awaiting orders. The captain flicked 2 fingers forward. Move. Rojas was gone before the mercs realized they weren't alone. A quick, clean kill. One Zorak barely managed a wheezing grunt before a blade found the soft tissue between his exoskeletal plates. The second merc turned, confusion flickering across his reptilian eyes. But it was already too late. A silenced shot from Lanier's sidearm struck home. The Zorak slumped, dead before he hit the floor. Ekström and Oshiro pulled the bodies into the shadows, concealing them beneath a stack of old crates. Oshiro knelt beside one of the corpses, fingers tracing over the mercenary's wrist-mounted comms unit. They're using low-frequency encrypted channels, he murmured. No automated biometrics, just manual check-ins. Lanier nodded. Good. That buys us time. They moved again, faster now. The central shield control was just ahead. In the lower levels of the fortress, Thunder Team navigated through a dimly lit service corridor. Major Dave Oliveira held up a closed fist, bringing the team to an immediate stop. He turned, exchanging a silent glance with Nikolai Dragunov, who knelt at a junction ahead, scanning the path forward. They've cut security protocols here, Felix Weber whispered, his fingers ghosting over an inactive scanner panel. No automated turrets, no locked doors. Oliveira frowned. Forced cooperation? Weber nodded slightly. Most likely. Either the mercs bribed someone, or they had leverage. Dragunov shifted, his heavy frame moving with surprising stealth for a man of his size. "Doesn't matter now," he muttered. "Only thing that matters is that we use it." Oliveira pressed forward, keeping low as the team reached an auxiliary storage bay. The scent of fuel and metallic residue hung thick in the air. Arjun Bhatia, their marksman, took position at the entrance, his rifle held steady as his sharp eyes scanned the upper walkways. "Clear for now," he murmured. Weber moved toward a stack of supply crates, inspecting the contents. His fingers brushed across a shipment tag. He stiffened. "This is Eldorai stock," he whispered. This place was an active colony supply depot before the invasion. Okafor, standing at his six, frowned. "And now?" Weber met his gaze. "Now, it's a war chest." Oliveira glanced at the crates of weapons and rations, the markings barely scratched away beneath fresh mercenary identifiers. This was stolen property, repurposed for the Zorak occupation. He turned to Dragunov. "Mark this location. We'll use it later." The Russian gave a curt nod, setting a small tracking beacon on the side of the largest container. Bhatia's voice came through the comms, low and controlled. "Movement." The team froze. The sound of heavy boots approached from a corridor adjacent to the bay. A patrol. 3 mercenaries. Oliveira flicked his wrist, Dragunov and Okafor to the right. Weber and Bhatia to the left. The team melted into the shadows. The first mercenary stepped into view, scanning the bay. His helmet's integrated visor scanned the room, but the dim lighting and thermal distortion from the storage units masked Thunder Team's presence. His partner followed, a Zorak officer by the insignia on his pauldron. His tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Something's wrong here," he muttered in their guttural dialect. His companion shrugged. "You're paranoid. They never saw it coming." 2 muffled shots. The first merc dropped before he could react, a single bullet finding the base of his skull. The Zorak officer turned, snarling, but Dragunov's blade silenced him before he could sound the alarm. The last soldier barely had time to draw his weapon before Bhatia took him down with a precise shot to the temple. A quiet stillness followed. Oliveira exhaled. Bodies secured. Move. Thunder Team slipped back into the corridor. The path to Containment Block 3 was clear, for now. Zalvikar stood at the center of the fortress command chamber, his claws drumming impatiently against the console. The silence from the Eldorai ship was stretching too long. It unnerved him. His gaze flicked toward the holodisplay, where the Arkavel remained in orbit, unmoving. "They should be groveling by now," he muttered, irritation creeping into his tone. A Zorak technician hesitated before speaking. "Sir, we continue to detect unexpected power fluctuations, this time in the lower sectors." Zalvikar's eyes narrowed. "What kind of fluctuations?" The technician adjusted his controls. "Minor but erratic. Some of our automated systems are drawing inconsistent power loads. It could be simple infrastructure strain, but..." Zalvikar's mandibles clicked together sharply. "Or someone tampering with them." The technician's throat bobbed. "It's not enough to trigger an alert, but I've flagged the readings as anomalies." Zalvikar let out a low growl, his claws tightening against the console. "No alarms, no direct interference, just flickers?" "Yes, sir, but only in specific areas. Maintenance tunnels, storage blocks, places that don't see much activity." Zalvikar's gaze darkened. "Then send a patrol. If it's a power fluctuation, I want it fixed. If it's something else..." His mandibles twitched into a sneer. "I want them dead before they cause me an actual problem." The warlord turned to his officers. "Keep an eye on Ulik. Double the guards in the maximum security area. No mistakes." A deep growl rumbled in his chest as he watched the Arkavel once more. Still silent, still waiting. His instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. Captain Randy Lanier and Shadow Team reached the shield control center. The door loomed before them, reinforced but not impenetrable. The mercenaries hadn't expected an infiltration team to make it this far. Ekstrom unhooked a black cylindrical device from his belt and placed it against the control terminal. "Charges set," he murmured. "Ready to fry their entire defense grid." Lanier activated his comms. Shadow Team in position. A second later, Thunder Team's signal came through. Oliveira's voice was steady. "We're close." Lanier's eyes didn't leave the glowing display in front of him. The countdown had already begun. They were past the point of no return. The damp, metallic air of the detention block carried the unmistakable stench of blood, fear, and exhaustion. Thunder Team moved swiftly, their footfalls silent against the cold floors as they advanced deeper into the makeshift prison complex. Oliveira raised a clenched fist, bringing the team to a sudden halt. His eyes swept the narrow corridor ahead, where the dim glow of containment fields cast eerie shadows along the walls. Rows of cells stretched into the distance, each one holding frightened Eldorei captives, civilians, diplomats, and what remained of the colony's security force. Some were injured, their wounds hastily bandaged with whatever scraps of cloth they could find. Others simply stared blankly, their luminous silver eyes dulled by fatigue and despair. Weber moved forward, his hands working quickly over a holographic control panel. The Jorak security interface was crude, but effective. "Give me a minute," he whispered. "I'll have these open." Okafor kept watch over the prisoners, his dark eyes scanning their condition. He knelt beside one of the nearest captives, a younger Eldorei male with a deep plasma burn across his chest, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Help is here," he assured him. "Stay quiet, and we'll get you all out." A shuddered breath of relief spread through the prisoners, but Oliveira's focus remained locked on one cell at the far end of the corridor. There. Varesh Ulik was slumped against the back wall, his wrists and ankles secured by an energy restraint field. The once proud Eldorei statesman was now a battered shell of himself, his robes torn, his face gaunt with fatigue. His silver-white skin was streaked with dried blood, and his breathing was shallow. Oliveira stepped forward, lowering his rifle. "Counselor Ulik," he said quietly. Ulik's head tilted upward, his eyes blinking against the harsh lighting. He studied Oliveira for a long moment before exhaling weakly. "You're not Eldorei." A faint nod from Oliveira. "No, sir, but we're here to get you out." Weber worked fast, navigating the control panel with practiced speed. A sharp beep echoed through the corridor, and the containment fields deactivated. The prisoners staggered forward as the restraints flickered out of existence. Okafor was at Ulik's side in an instant, catching him before he collapsed completely. "You with us, counselor?" he asked, checking his vitals. Ulik let out a slow breath. "More than I was. A moment ago." The team had no time to celebrate. A metallic clank rang out from the corridor beyond. "Footsteps," Dragunov muttered, raising his rifle. "Heavy, mercs." Oliveira nodded. "Move." Elsewhere in the colony, Shadow Team was already making their next move. Captain Randy Lanier crouched behind an abandoned terminal, his eyes locked on a small, flickering display. The fortress's secondary security grid had been compromised by their earlier sabotage, but something else was happening. Movement. Eldorei resistance. Through the screen, he watched as small groups of civilians emerged from hiding spots deep within the colony, scavenging whatever weapons they could find. The shields were still active, but the cracks were forming. Lanier activated his comms. "Command, we have resistance fighters mobilizing in multiple sectors. They're organizing." Admiral Kamal Asghari's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Understood, Captain. Can they hold their ground?" Lanier hesitated. "Not without help." He switched channels. "Shadow Team to all hidden cells. The defenses are being sabotaged. You're not alone." A static-filled pause. Then a voice, hushed but determined. Then tell us what to do. Lanier's jaw set. We're sending weapons caches locations now. Hit them where it hurts. The rebellion had begun. In the fortress command chamber, Zalvikar paced with growing frustration. The Eldorei ship remained silent, and his mercenaries had yet to report back from the lower levels. His patience was running thin. Then, a console beeped sharply. "Sir," a Zorak technician called. "Security feeds are showing unusual movements in multiple sectors. Civilians, armed civilians." Zalvikar's mandibles twitched. "They're fighting back?" Another alert. The technician frowned. "And we just lost surveillance feeds near the detention block." The warlord's eyes narrowed. "Tell me that's a malfunction." The technician swallowed. "No, sir." Zalvikar let out a deep, guttural snarl. He turned sharply to his officers. "Deploy kill squads. Contain this now, and double the guards at the control center. This is no longer a waiting game." "And the prisoners?" one of his subordinates asked. Zalvikar's claws curled against his gauntlet. "Kill them, all of them." The order was given. The gunfire erupted just as Thunder Team cleared the corridor. A squad of Zorak enforcers, alerted by the failing security grid, poured into the detention level, weapons raised. "Cover the prisoners!" Oliveira shouted as he pulled Ulik behind cover. Dragunov fired first. His rifle barked, dropping one mercenary before the others could react. Batia followed suit, placing precise rounds into their armored joints. "Too many," Okafor muttered, shielding a group of Eldorei civilians as shots ripped through the walls around them. Oliveira's mind worked fast. He tapped his comms. "Shadow Team, we're pinned down at the detention block, moving prisoners but need support." Lanier's voice came through instantly. "Hold tight. We're moving." But they were running out of time. Mercenaries advanced, closing the distance, forcing Thunder Team into tighter positions. Ulik gritted his teeth, his voice hoarse but urgent. "They're not here just to stop us." He locked eyes with Oliveira. "They're here to make sure I don't leave alive." The Major reloaded his rifle, jaw tightening. "Well, that's not happening." Oliveira caught movement from the side passage, a second Zorak squad attempting to flank them. "No time," he muttered. "Batia, Dragunov, set charges on the main passage. Blow it behind us." Weber was already rerouting door controls, forcing emergency blast doors open to a secondary route out. "We've got an exit," he called. Batia armed the charges. 5 seconds. Move." The team pushed forward, dragging Ulik and the other prisoners through the passage just as the explosion rocked the detention level. A thick wall of debris collapsed behind them, sealing off pursuit. For now. The transmission came seconds later. Lanier's voice was sharp. "Shadow Team is in position. Sabotage charges are set. We're ready." Oliveira exhaled, checking his surroundings. The prisoners were secured. The resistance was rising. Ulik's breathing was labored, but he turned to Oliveira, his expression grim with realization. "They knew," he muttered. "The Zorak. They knew exactly where to strike." Oliveira frowned. "What do you mean?" Ulik's eyes locked onto his. This wasn't just mercenaries. They had help from the inside. A long silence followed. Then Oliveira keyed his comms. "Command, we have a problem." The atmosphere inside the secure chamber of the Archivel was tense, the silence almost suffocating. Morgan Wagner stood near the holo display, arms crossed, his gaze sharp and calculating as he monitored the unfolding situation. Beside him, Selkar Vir clenched his hands behind his back, his bioluminescent silver eyes flicking toward the mission clock. Time was almost up. The Zorak had issued their ultimatum. The diplomatic fleet had remained silent, and Zalvikar was waiting for an answer. But Wagner still wasn't giving him one. His gaze remained fixed on the battle readiness data from the orbital fleet. The moment had to be perfect. A soft beep echoed through his earpiece. A private transmission. He answered instantly. "Go." Deep beneath Velkara, Captain Randy Lanier and Shadow Team waited in the darkness of the shield control chamber. The charges were already in place, the final overrides prepped for detonation. A faint vibration came through his comm unit. Thunder Team's signal. Lanier tapped the final command sequence quickly. The fortress's defenses collapsed in an instant. Across Velkara, shield projectors overloaded, their energy barriers disintegrating into flickering distortions before vanishing completely. The fortified dome that had protected the mercenaries from orbital retaliation was gone. On the hollow monitors inside the Zorak command center, warning signals screamed across the display. Zalvakar's yellow, slit-pupiled eyes widened in disbelief as the colony's entire defensive network failed simultaneously. "What?" a technician stammered. His claws raced over the console. "Sir, all shielding is offline. Energy grids just flatlined. It isn't a power failure. It's a coordinated breach." Zalvakar's mandibles curled in fury. "Impossible!" The lights in the command center pulsed red, multiple alarms triggering throughout the base. His forces were suddenly exposed, vulnerable. His chest heaved with realization. This was never just a diplomatic engagement. This was an attack, a carefully orchestrated human deception, and now they were here. He turned, his roar of rage echoing through the chamber. "Find Julek! Kill him! Now!" Officers scattered. "And that cursed fleet! Wipe them from the sky!" The mercenary strike squadrons launched instantly, their sleek black-hulled interceptors racing toward the Eldorei diplomatic vessels, plasma weapons charging. The Archivel and its last remaining escort ships had no real firepower. They had only survived this long by holding formation and stalling. Now that stalling had run out. The mercenary fighters locked on, plasma lances heating, their targeting systems ready to finish the job. But before the first shot was fired, a new alarm shrieked across the battlefield. Sensors flared red. Zalvakar's eyes snapped to the hollow displays. New contacts, multiple, large, and then the void of space ruptured open. A void ripped open, and from it came a warship, twice the size of the Archivel, bristling with heavy-caliber railguns and kinetic shielding strong enough to weather a fleet's wrath. It did not arrive as a mere ship. It arrived as judgment. The HSS Crusade, Admiral Kamal Asghari's command vessel. The mercenaries barely had time to react before the first salvo tore through their formations. Hyper-accelerated railgun slugs split the darkness of space, shattering the lead Zorak squadrons before they could veer off course. The remaining interceptors scattered, their attack run obliterated before it had even begun. A moment later, the Crusade's transmission cut through every active channel, Zorak Command, the Eldorei fleet, and every mercenary still alive on Velkara. Admiral Asghari's voice was calm, cold, absolute. "This is Admiral Kamal Asghari of the HSS Crusade." A pause. Then in a tone that left no room for negotiation. "Your time is up." Orbital combat erupted in full force. The Zorak fleet, now fragmented and leaderless, scrambled to regroup. Their once coordinated formations were reduced to fractured, desperate movements. Ships veered erratically, dodging the relentless barrage from the HSS Crusade and its squadrons of human interceptors. Inside the Crusade's command deck, Admiral Kamal Asghari, eyes fixed on the tactical readouts, watched attentively as his forces continued to tighten the noose. "Sir, enemy vessels are attempting to break past Sector 5. Asghari's voice was firm. "Cut them off. Deploy interceptor wings Bravo and Delta. No escape routes." "Aye, Admiral." The order was executed within seconds. Human fighters, sleek, fast-moving ships built for surgical precision, swept in from both flanks, pinning the retreating mercenaries against Velkara's orbit. The Zorak had one last chance, and they knew it. Inside the command chamber of his fortress, Zalvakar watched in mounting horror as his fleet was being torn apart. "This isn't possible," he hissed, his claws curling into the edge of his control console. He spun toward his officers. "Activate the Kratak charges, now!" A silence. The command chamber froze. A nervous technician turned to him. "Sir, the Kratak have already been disarmed." Zalvakar's mandibles flared in fury. "What? How?" Another officer's voice shook with fear. "Sabotage!" The humans, they knew. His roar of rage echoed across the room, but outside no one cared. The battle had already passed the point of no return. On the ground, Velkara was burning. Gunfire rattled through the streets, plasma bolts ripping through shattered buildings as mercenary squads fought to hold their last positions. But they were losing. The Eldore had risen. Captain Randy Lanier pushed forward, his weapon barking short, controlled bursts as Shadow Team advanced through a narrow alleyway toward the remnants of a Zorak defensive barricade. "Move up! Keep the pressure on them!" Mateo Rojas vaulted over debris, his blade flashing as he silently dispatched a Zorak enforcer before the alien could react. Lars Ekstrom crouched behind a wrecked vehicle, setting up a remote detonation charge on the last remaining turret emplacement blocking their advance. Setting charge. 5 seconds. Lanier gave a nod. "Do it." A controlled explosion ripped through the street, the turret detonating in a fiery blast, sending mercenary bodies flying, but not all of them. As the smoke cleared, a lone Zorak gunner, badly wounded but still alive, lifted his weapon toward Lanier's position and fired. The shot slammed into one of the Marines, knocking him off his feet with a pained grunt. Kenji Oshiro. Lanier barely had time to register it before his instincts took over. He snapped his rifle up. One well-placed shot dropped the Zorak instantly. But Oshiro wasn't moving. "Medic! Now!" Ekstrom and Rojas were already there, dragging him behind cover. Okafor sprinted in moments later, dropping to his knees. Blood pooled beneath Oshiro's armor. Too much. Too fast. "He's bad, Captain. We need to evac him now." Okafor's voice was urgent, already reaching for a trauma pack. Lanier clenched his jaw. His mind raced. If they pulled back now, the mission was compromised. But leaving Oshiro in this condition... He exhaled sharply. "Okafor, stabilize him. We'll get him out as soon as we secure the site." Okafor nodded immediately. "I'll do what I can." Lanier turned to Ekstrom. "Hold this position, no matter what." Ekstrom nodded grimly. "You've got it. Go." Lanier moved forward, doing what a Marine is supposed to do. Finish the mission. He trusted his men to protect Oshiro, and so he pressed on. Across the city, Thunder Team had joined the fray. Major Dave Oliveira and his squad had pushed through the lower sectors, now engaging the last pockets of Zorak resistance near the colony's control center. "Push forward, they're breaking!" Oliveira shouted over the comms, leading his team into the ruins of a collapsed plaza. Felix Weber fired controlled bursts, covering Arjun Bhatia as he lined up precision shots on the last remaining snipers. "Two down, clearing the last one." A moment later, a high-caliber round took the mercenary cleanly through the head. Samuel Okafor was moving civilians, helping the last Eldore survivors out of the remaining combat zones. The battle was almost over. Back inside the fortress, Zalvakar was out of options. His fleet was decimated, his ground forces overrun, his sabotage plan neutralized. The Zorak warlord turned sharply, making his way toward a hidden corridor at the rear of the command center. An auxiliary hangar, a single ship prepped for emergency escape. He wasn't staying to die. Zalvakar didn't care about his men, didn't care about Velkara, didn't care about anything but his own survival. And so, as his forces fell and his command crumbled around him, the mighty warlord ran. The hangar was barely holding together. Fires raged across the walls, licking at the reinforced bulkheads, casting jagged shadows over the sleek, black-hulled shuttle stationed at the far end. Emergency sirens wailed, mixing with the distant roar of gunfire from the collapsing fortress. Zalvakar moved swiftly, his heavy boots clanking against the metal flooring. His mandibles twitched with rage, his chest heaving with each breath. Everything had fallen apart. The mercenary fleet was gone. His forces were scattered, dead, or surrendering. Velkara was lost, but he wasn't going to die here. He reached the shuttle's boarding ramp and bolted up the incline. One step inside, almost there. And then, the first shot rang out. The plasma bolt slammed into the shuttle's engine block, sending a spray of molten metal bursting into the air. The power conduits ruptured, and the ship lurched violently, its escape sequence cut short. Zalvikar spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. Two figures stood in the entryway, Captain Randy Lanier and Major Dave Oliveira. Their rifles were still raised, the barrels smoking from the perfectly placed shots that had just crippled the shuttle. "That's far enough, Warlord," Lanier said, his voice steady, deadly cold. Zalvikar snarled, his claws flexing as he reached for his sidearm, but Oliveira was already moving. A single, precise shot knocked the weapon from the mercenary's grip, sending it clattering across the floor. "Don't," Oliveira warned. "You're not fast enough." Zalvikar bared his fangs, his massive form tensing, contemplating a charge. But he wasn't stupid. He had lost. Slowly his claws raised into the air, his yellow eyes burning with silent fury. "I should have burned this planet to the ground," he growled. Lanier stepped forward. "Too late for regrets." With a swift motion, he secured restraints around the mercenary's wrists, locking them in place. The great warlord of the Zorak, the butcher of Velkara, was now just another prisoner. Admiral Kamal Asghari stepped through the smoldering corridors of the fortress, his dark eyes scanning the ruins of what had once been the Zorak command center. His officers followed closely, their weapons at the ready, but there was no longer any need for them. The battle was over. His gaze hardened as he spotted Lanier and Oliveira leading a bound and defeated Zalvikar toward him. The mercenary was still defiant, his mandibles twitching in what might have been amusement. Asghari didn't react. He stepped forward, his hands folded neatly behind his back, and looked Zalvikar directly in the eyes. "You had help here." A long pause. Then, with a voice as cold as the void, Asghari added, "And you will talk." Zalvikar's mandibles curled upward, forming a mocking grin. And then, he laughed. Low, guttural, a cruel, rasping sound. The Admiral simply watched him, his expression stoic. Finally, Zalvikar tilted his head, his tone dripping with mockery. "Do you really think you'll get anything from me?" Asghari said nothing. Instead, he turned slightly. "Take him," he ordered. The Marines dragged Zalvikar away, his laughter fading as he was hauled toward the extraction zone. Outside, the fortress lay in ruins. Smoke rose from the shattered structures. Wreckage from the destroyed mercenary vessels still burned, casting an eerie glow over the battlefield. Yet among the devastation, there was victory. In the streets, Eldoret civilians emerged from the shelters where they had been hiding. Some moved cautiously, their expression still etched with fear, while others embraced one another, exhausted but relieved. The occupation was over. Humans and Eldoret, together, had won. Varesh Julik sat against a makeshift medical station, his posture stiff as a medic wrapped a fresh bandage around his shoulder. The pain was manageable, nothing compared to the last few days of captivity. But the weight of what had happened was beginning to settle on him. Around him, Eldoret survivors moved in quiet disbelief. Some sought medical aid. Others simply stood, staring at the wreckage of their home, trying to comprehend that the nightmare was finally over. The Zorak were gone. The planet was theirs again. Julik's gaze wandered past the ruins, settling on a group of men gathered near the fortress steps, the ones truly responsible for this victory. Admiral Kamal Asghari stood with his officers, with Shadow Team and Thunder Team positioned nearby. Lanier, Oliveira, Weber, Okafor, Dragunov, Oshiro, Rojas, men who had fought through hell to make this happen. They were exhausted, their uniforms scorched, stained with dust and blood, yet they stood tall, their mission complete. Then, his voice came, steady, resolute. "Nice work, Marines. Now take a rest, heal your wounds, and prepare for the next mission." No grand speeches, no celebration. The work wasn't done. It never was. Julik felt a strange sense of finality settle over him. He pushed himself up, ignoring the stiffness in his muscles, and walked toward the gathering. The human soldiers turned as he approached, their eyes assessing him with the same quiet respect they had given their own wounded. Ulick took a breath, scanning their faces, the men who had fought for a planet that wasn't even theirs. Finally, his gaze locked onto Morgan Wagner. The human chancellor met his eyes, saying nothing. Ulick held his stare for a long moment before exhaling. "Now, I owe you more than a favor." His voice was steady, full of weight. "I owe you my life." Wagner gave a single nod. Nothing more was needed. As the ruins of Velkara smoldered in the distance, Ulick finally understood. This had never been about diplomacy. It had been about who was willing to act, and the humans had acted. Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.